Hi everyone. So welcome to the last Wwise tutorial, which explains how the interactive music structures work within Wwise. And what we're going to do is we're going to again open up Wwise, and I'm going to show you how music switches work. So we've talked about tracks. We've talked about so wave files going on tracks, tracks going into segments, segments going into playlists, and now we're actually going to talk about how switches work. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new session and call it demonstration switches. I'm going to ignore the plugins because I don't need them. I'm going to ignore the license for now because this is just for demonstration purposes. I'm going to go ahead and go to my interactive music layout. Then I'm going to create a few new segments. I'm going to create 3. So I'm going to do it the quick and easy way by dragging in the individual wave files into my interactive music hierarchy. It's going to create a track for me, a segment for me, which is great. I'm going to rename these so we know what they are, because it can be a little difficult keeping track of all these structures. And so this is actually a segment. And I'm going to do the same with layer 2. And it asks me what I want to do on the import. So it's created this one. By the way, I'm going to call this segment 1. And then this is segment 2. And one more, segment 3. When I'm doing this, it nicely makes my loop points the beginning and end of file. So I don't have to set that up again. That's one of the nice things about this. So we'll go in here, call this segment 3. And did I rename the tracks yet? No, not yet. So I'll just rename the track. Just call it track. Rename this other one over here. We'll call it this track. Okay. So we have 3 segments. Each segment has a track in it. Then what I want to do is actually create 3 separate playlists, one for each one of these segments. So I can do that by right-clicking on one of the segments and then saying new parent, because it's above it, that it's a playlist. So we have a playlist, and so playlist container, this one is 3, then this one is number 2, create another playlist for that. Actually, that is number 1. And then my last segment, new parent, playlist, and this will be number 2. Okay, so I have 3 playlists. Now, the playlists aren't set up yet. When I look in the playlist down here, I don't see that yet. So what I want to make sure is that in playlist container 1, that I drag in my segment, and I want to make it loop forever. So I'm going to change the loop count to be infinite. And then I'm going to do the same for music container 2. Drag in segment 2. I'm going to make it loop forever. And then lastly, segment container or playlist 3. I'm going to make sure that playlist 3 has segment 3 added to it, and it's going to loop infinitely. All right, so I have 3 segments, each one with its corresponding playlist. Now I can make a switch. And what a switch is used for is to go between 2 different playlists. So that's what we're going to create now. So I basically can take each one of these and then new parent, select all 3, new parent, music switch container. Now put inside of that, I don't know what that was, there's an error, but it's still, it seems hasn't crashed yet, so I'm going to hit Command S to save. All right, so I have a switch container. Now, what a music switch is if I'm in a game and I'm going between like location 1 to location 2 to location 3, that's how a switch container works. And I can choose how I go from music queue A to music queue B to music queue C. In order to do that, now we're starting to communicate with the game engine. So we have a new tab that we need to learn about. It's called the Game Syncs tab. And we're going to create a state. So there are switches, states, game parameters, and triggers. We'll talk about game syncs in another video. we just want to get through how switches work. So I'm going to create a new state group. So a state group is like the player state. And so the player state might be, let's call it player location. So that's my state group is called the player location. And then within each group itself, I can create a state. So I'll call this forest. So I have the forest state, and then I'll create another one, which would be the cave state, and we'll create another one called the town. So we have cave, forest, and town. We haven't connected these to anything yet, but we basically have a game parameter called player location. The game would actually send Wwise this information. It would say, oh, now we're in the cave. Okay, great. What music do I play? That's where we come in. We need to connect the cave to a specific playlist. So we head back over to the audio tab. We head back over to the switch. Now, in the switch, this is where things get a little complicated, but what we can do is using this double arrow, we use the state group player location, and then it shows us cave, forest, none, it added none, and then town. What I'm going to do is add playlist container 1, so this is our first playlist, and that will be for cave. And 2 will be for forest, and 3 will be for town. All right, so I can see that represented down below in this section, that the cave plays 1, the forest plays 2, and town plays 3. Okay, I'm going to unpin my playlist, or unpin the segment, and play the switch container. All right, so I'm going to play the switch container. Right now, you can see player location is set to town. So town is playing playlist 3. That's great. I'm going to switch my state to something else. I'm going to switch it to forest. And so when it gets done, by default, it waits to the end of this queue before it switches to forest. And then I'm going to go to cave. Now, by default, again, it's waiting to go to cave, so it's waiting to the end of the actual phrase itself. And then it switches to this other piece of music. Great. What if I want to change that so it actually switches quicker? Well, in the switch container, you have a bunch of parameters, and one is called transitions. And right now, we have a default transition. I can customize transitions from one to another, but in the default transition, it waits, it exits the source piece of music, the music that's currently playing, at the exit queue. And the exit queue is the end of my current segment. Okay, so what I'm going to do is change that to go next beat. Okay, so on the very next beat, it's going to play. So let's go ahead and now play this. So now when I'm in cave and go to forest, it's going to change on the beat. Now that's great. You can change it to something else, like change it to a grid. The grid is set up in the segment itself, which I'm not going to get into in this video, but you also can change it to a custom queue, those markers that we created for our segments. Or the exit queue, again, is the end of the segment itself. There is a cool feature, though, that I want to talk about. And so we're going to open this up a little bit. So there's the source and then the destination. And what I'm going to set up is that the destination is the music that we're going to, and we can sync that to the same time as the current playing segment, so that when the new piece comes in, it's actually picking up. So if it leaves the old one at bar 2, beat 3, it's going to pick up the new playlist that we're going to at bar 2, beat 3. And so this is kind of cool. So when I play this, so the downbeats are all the same because I changed it to the same time as playing segments. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So the downbeats will remain the same because it's basically syncing to the same time as the playing segment. Now, a couple other things. Let's say we like that, but we want to fade. So instead of just clipping on the next beat, we want it to fade instead. We can choose a fade out time. The source is on the left, the destination is on the right, and I can say let's fade over 1 second. Now I don't want it to fade out. I want it to fade out after the destination starts. So I'll also switch this to 1. So now the transition point will start after. And then we can also look at the fade in. I'm going to leave this the way it is. So I don't want any kind of fade when the new one picks up. Oh, actually, let's put a fade here. So maybe we also have a 1 second fade, but we fade in before the actual sync point. All right, so here we go. So we're going to hear kind of 2 at the same time. Cave, forest. So there's kind of a nice transition between the two to make those work. And lastly, you can use a transition segment to kind of bridge 2 pieces of music. And so that's where you do that. Here you use a transition segment, you pick the wave that it's going to play or the segment that it's going to play, and these can have fade-ins and fade-outs too. So that's basically how segments work, and I hope you enjoyed these set of tutorials. We're going to get more into this stuff in other video tutorials later on when we connect all these pieces together, but I hope you enjoyed these for now.